thing
It
that we're
is.
all in with
Yeah,
all these
9 hours
online
is weird.
meetings. So.
Yeah, 9 hours is weird to coordinate. Anyways, hello and welcome to Just Animals podcast. I'm Elle, and with me as always is my dad, aka Guy.
Hello, Pod World. If you didn't listen to the last podcast with, what was it, Dr. Troy, go back and listen to that. It's phenomenal.
I haven't decided the order that these episodes are coming out yet. So.
Oh, you haven't decided the order, but
No.
We're happy to have Dr. Nora here today. And
yes, and
thanks
we have live from Germany. Well, not live, but with joining us from Germany,
you're fading in and out.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. How about now? So sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Okay. Anyways, joining us all the way from Germany, way across the pond, we have Dr. Nora today to discuss our animal of the week. Go ahead, Dr. Nora, introduce yourself to our listeners and just give us a little background about your research and who you are and what you've done.
Hi, thanks, Elle, for this opportunity to join you for your podcast. It's lovely to talk about my favorite animal, which is the aardvark. And I did a couple of years of research on aardvarks in Southern Africa, or more specifically in South Africa, in the Kalahari, as part of my doctorate research. And I looked at how aardvarks basically survive in this very hot and dry environments, what they need, and when it gets too much for them, basically. Yeah.
So I have a question for you, and I hope you understand the reference. But did Arthur elevate the standings of Aardvark or bring Aardvarks to the attention of children and humans? Do you know who Arthur is?
I have heard of Aardvark, of Arthur, but actually only once I started working on the Aardvark.
Oh, really? Okay. So, to a little background, Arthur is a kiddie show with books and computer games for kids in the U.S. I'm sure that there's a German equivalent of little kiddie shows. Yes. And he's an Aardvark, and they've got rats and monkeys and rabbits, anthropomorphized essentially. But yeah, he's Arthur the Aardvark. So that's how we as kids knew.
Excuse me. Bunny had it was a CD, and it was called Arthur's Teacher Trouble. The bell rang. The first day of school was over.
Dr. Nora doesn't care about that.
She doesn't care.
Nora doesn't care about that. No,
but I think he elevated Aardvarks in the eyes of all U.S. children.
I think that's excellent because Aardvarks are so far away from the US, and it's lovely that they're represented so well there. And we actually also have a very popular children's series with a mouse and an elephant. And did you know that elephants are very closely related to aardvarks?
Right.
That seems weird to me.
That is crazy.
They're one of the closest relatives of aardvarks, just as the manatee and dugongs, and then some other African.
What about the anteater? Is that a relative?
No, not really. Well, they're both mammals, but other than that, they're not very close.
Okay.
I mean, we're mammals too, so it's about that close of a relation. Where Okay, so can you go ahead and give us their is it Latin or Greek?
Latin.
Their scientific name.
Yes, of course. It's a bit of a mix between Latin and Greek, and the scientific name of the aardvark is Orycteropus arthur. So maybe that's where Arthur comes in.
That could be. Yes.
But Arthur actually refers to Africa as a continent because that is their origin.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing.
The first name, Orycteropus, means something like digging foot or burrowing foot.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I've figured out that the name Aardvark comes from the Afrikaans language, meaning earth pig. So they've got quite a few names like ant bear, earth pig, Aardvark. What do you call them in German? Is it still Aardvark or?
No, we call them Erdferkel, which means earth piglet, even though they're not related to pigs at all.
No kidding. So isn't Afrikaans kind of a mix of Dutch and German, if I have that correct?
It's more... it originates in the 17th century Dutch. So it has a couple of English elements and actually even some French and then some local words also. Right. And it basically developed into its own language. But
gotcha.
If you're a German, you will probably be able to understand a bit of Dutch and also a bit of Afrikaans.
Okay,
well,
gotcha.
You speak very good English. How long have you been studying English? All your life?
Thanks a lot. Yes, more or less. I guess I had my first English kiddies classes in primary school. But
yeah, you guys do it right over there.
It helped that I lived in South Africa for a couple of years, I guess.
Oh, well, that makes a difference. Sure. Yes. Right.
Yeah. That we need to do that in the US. I don't know why we don't start teaching language to smaller children. But anyways, as for back to our aardvark friend, they've got narrow faces with an elongated snout that actually looks like a pig nose at the end, and on the tops of their heads they have these huge rabbit-like ears. When I was reading about them, Dr. Nora, it was someone described them as if you were to take a bunch of parts from a bunch of different animals and put it into all together, you would get the aardvark, like the rabbit ears, the pig nose, the long nose, their feet and whatnot.
Do they have a long tongue, Dr. Nora?
They do, yes, but not super long. So some animals have the giant anteater. They have these super long tongues that they roll up at the back of the throat, I guess. The aardvark doesn't have that. It's only about 20 to 30 centimeters long.
Oh, still pretty long tongue.
Okay.
Still pretty long, yes.
Yeah, and they've got short necks and mostly hairless bodies with an arched back. Is there a specific reason that they've got sparse hair on their bodies? I saw some that were pretty fluffy and some that looked kind of like a naked dog or a pig, essentially, with very little hair.
Yeah, it's true, Elle. And we're not quite sure. I mean aardvark researchers or aardvark enthusiasts. It's not quite clear why the aardvark has such sparse fur, and we also think that there might be regional differences. For example, aardvarks occur in different habitats.
Sure.
One of them is the rainforest, and there we found from camera trap footage that the aardvarks don't have a lot of hair. And whereas in areas that also get a bit colder, like the Kalahari or the Karoo in southern Africa, there the aardvarks have longer hair, especially on their back legs, and the hair can also be quite dark. And also young aardvarks can be a bit fluffy sometimes, so that's quite cute. Not like your usual dog, but
right,
a bit velvety maybe.
Right. Okay, because that makes sense though. The rainforest ones would be a little bit more hairless versus the ones where deserts get cold. Because I saw some with quite a bit of fur back leg and kind of underside, and then some again were almost naked. And I was like, okay, we got a couple different things going on. And
exactly.
Then
and also the nose of the aardvark is quite hairy because it keeps the sand out of the nostrils. And when I studied my aardvark, we sometimes had to catch aardvarks and then release them again. And you could feel the nose; it feels like a velvety marshmallow, so it's fluffy and squishy.
Oh, how cool!
Really nice.
How cool. Okay,
so I have to ask you a question. Let me get a question in here. So I'm looking at Wikipedia because
why are you looking at Wikipedia?
Just time out. Let me ask her the question. It says, genetically speaking, the aardvark is a living fossil as its chromosomes are highly conserved, reflecting much of the early Eutherin, Eutherian arrangement before the divergence of the major taxa. Could you explain that in English? Or
layman's terms, not English.
But what that means, it's an idiomatic expression, Nora, which means
she knows what that
simplify.
means.
Well, maybe she doesn't. I don't know. No, because she said I'm speaking English. She may not understand it's an idiomatic expression. So when we say, could you explain that in English? What that means to people who speak English is, can you make that a little more understandable to the layman?
Yeah. Or you can give it to us in German.
Now she probably forgot what I asked.
Okay, shush. Turn off your phone.
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, right.
Yes, right. Okay, hold on. I will repeat the question.
No, she got it. She got it.
Oh, she understands it?
Just kidding.
Yes.
Okay.
She was kidding.
Yeah. So basically so first of all, I have to say that as a scientist, I generally don't use Wikipedia as a scientific reference.
Thank you.
But it does give you a good impression, and I quite like many parts of the Aardvark article on Wikipedia, especially on the English page. So whoever has written that, thanks a lot. Also, basically what you've just read out means that aardvarks haven't genetically changed much in the last 25 million years.
Wow.
Yes.
I think that's like the tapir, right? Because we've talked about them, and they're pretty much, I believe, genetically unchanged for millions of
Yeah,
years?
that's a good question because I'm not so familiar with the tapir genetics, but the aardvark, it's first of all, it's the only species within their genus. So in the
Okay.
aardvark genus, there's only the aardvark.
Okay.
So there's no other very, very close relative. And then
Gotcha.
the ones that get closest are other Afrotheria, which are the elephant, the dugong, manatee, and then some other
Wow.
smaller animals that you might not know, like the hyrax or
No.
dassie, which is a small compact mammal that also lives in Africa, and some others. And and so the aardvark hasn't really changed genetically, but we think also not in terms of diet, physiology, and anatomy. So basically, the way the aardvark has lived has worked very well for the last 25 million years. The only
Yeah, let's
problem,
hope we don't screw it up.
Dad, can you turn your
that's
gain
what I
down?
was getting to now, because they have a bit of a problem in some of the areas where they occur now,
Right.
especially in the areas where I studied them. So in the semi-arid regions. First of all, aardvarks don't they occur everywhere south of the Sahara in Africa, which is a very big range and also covers very many different types of environment, from mountains to forests and rainforests and semi-deserts and savannas. But they don't occur in deserts because there's just not enough food for them. So with climate change, the problem is that some of the semi-deserts are slowly turning into deserts, which means that the
Oh,
aardvarks are basically driven out of this environment because of the climatic factors, because it's getting too dry for them. And this is also what I observed when I was studying them in the Kalahari. There was a drought, which does regularly happen, but with climate change, it happens much more often, and the droughts are becoming harsher and longer, more intense. They are becoming more often, and what we saw was then during the droughts, some of the aardvarks actually died because what I found out was that when there was no rain, obviously, then vegetation can't grow, so there's no grass. But the aardvark depends indirectly on the grass because it eats the termites that depend on the grass. So without grass, there are not enough termites to sustain the aardvark's survival. And
boy, you're causing a lot of static, Eliana. Funny.
Sorry. I don't know what's going
So,
on.
Dr.
Sorry.
Nora, in this climactic change in in Africa, are there? You said there are periods, extended periods of drought, but then do you get tremendous flooding? To compensate at all, or is it just straight drought?
it's pretty much just straight drought.
Oh boy.
Mhm.
Well, we're having a problem with the drought here in the Southwest United States as well. It's where I live in Nevada. There's a lake called Lake Mead that is a big reservoir. It's the lowest it's been ever,
Wow.
and a lot of people depend on that for their water source. I almost spoke New York on you. Um, so yeah, it's bad. Um, so is it mostly termites? Do they eat any vegetation? Are they omnivores or just straight up termite and ants?
They are very specialized, and they have been for a very long time because that is what has worked for them for a very long time.
Yeah.
Aardvarks are strictly insectivorous, and actually, they only live on ants and termites. And in most areas where they occur, we think that they mostly eat ants. But the difference in the Kalahari region where I studied them was that they mostly depended on the termites. And the termites are so dependent on the vegetation. And so the aardvark, when there are no termites, has a big problem because it cannot compensate
Right.
for the absence of termites by
Right.
just eating ants. There are just not enough ants.
So will they migrate north to try to find moisture at all, or are they stay in their
Um,
range?
The problem is that migration in animals is also something that evolves over millions and millions of years, and the aardvark has not um, developed this behavior. So it will not be fast enough to develop this behavior now to cope with the changes that are occurring now. And we also found that aardvarks are very faithful to their home ranges. So they even stayed in their own burrow area, in their home range. They didn't even move far away from their own burrows inside the reserve, and they could have. I mean, they could have just.
What is the currently is our aardvarks? Oh, it says least concerned on this conservation status, but we can't believe this thing here that we read, because unless we talk to people like you that are really out in the field, I don't know who's giving these ratings. So what do you think their status is?
Yeah, so the status that you're referring to is provided by the International Union on the Conservation of Nature, the IUCN, and they do all the red list assessments for animal species and also actually plant species that are under threat. And there are very many different categories, ranging from extinct,
right,
threatened, vulnerable, and least concern, and some others in between. And the aardvark is considered least concern because it is occurring in many different habitats across the continent. And as a population as a whole, it is probably not critically endangered or under threat. But we think that in some areas now, with the climate changes that are happening, they might become vulnerable in those areas. But because the IUCN Red List assessment, as I said, only looks at the entire species, wherever they occur, so they basically lump everything together. This would include aardvarks all across the continent. And the population, we think that some populations might be more vulnerable than others. So I'm actually working with some colleagues. I'm part of the IUCN Red List assessment for the aardvark. And with some colleagues, we are now trying to explore whether there are options of at least adding a notification to this status, because it's very difficult to change the status as such.
Sure.
And it basically requires a very, very big population assessment, which is super difficult for aardvarks because they are so hard to see.
That's what I was going to just ask you. In that terms of the classification, are they doing a census? Maybe it's not called a census when you're talking about animals, but do they look at how many animals per square meter or per square kilometer? Or is there an objective measure? Is my question.
There are objective measures for very many species. So, for example, you can do census from the air when you're counting herds, or you can do recapture assessments, and so on. There are very many different options of counting animals and estimating the entire abundance of the population. But the aardvark is very difficult because it is nocturnal, so it only is active at night usually, and B, it's solitary, and there are very few aardvarks in the same area, so it's very difficult to assess the density. So how many aardvarks are there per 100 square miles?
Right. Plus, they're nocturnal, right? So
right. So
you would need an infrared camera to try to do a census on them.
Really quick, speaking of their nocturnal behavior, so when you were studying them out in the wild, were you having to change your clock to be on aardvark time? Were you up at night and asleep during the day?
I did that sometimes, yes. But, what we did for my study was we caught some aardvarks in the Kalahari with the help of veterinarians and vet nurses, and we implanted them with some tracking devices. Unfortunately, it wasn't GPS, so it didn't automatically send me a signal of where they were. So it was a radio signal. So I had to go into the field with an antenna looking for my aardvarks when they were sleeping inside the burrow. And then I basically waited in the evening for them to come out and followed them to observe them and do some behavioral observations on them. And but we wanted to mostly study the aardvarks without human interference.
Sure.
So after I had gotten some reference data, we basically left them alone.
Mm-hmm.
And what I then did was I still tracked my aardvarks when they were inside the burrows, but I left them alone. I just placed camera traps at their burrows to check when they were coming out and going back in.
Oh, gotcha.
But most of the time, they didn't actually go back into the same burrow. They just went to a different one. And Aardvarks had so many different burrows. I had more than 100 addresses for one of my Aardvarks.
Oh
so
my
basically,
gosh.
it never went back to the same burrow.
Oh my gosh.
Have you ever eaten an Aardvark cucumber?
What is that?
No, I've never even seen one. So the mythical Aardvark.
Can you turn your gain down, please? Turn your gain down.
Yeah. Okay.
You're very loud. Thank you.
Go ahead.
But anyways,
it says the relationship between the aardvark and the aardvark cucumber is symbiotic, meaning both species benefit. The aardvark gets a source of food, and the cucumber benefits as the seeds are released into the environment when the aardvark defecates. So they're spreading the seeds through that.
Yes, the opinions diverge a bit on the relationship between the aardvark and the so-called aardvark cucumber, because actually there have not been any proper studies to investigate whether the aardvark actually targets this cucumber or whether it just happens to sometimes eat seeds.
Right.
Because a lot of ants that the aardvarks eat are seed-eating ants. So the ants might actually be collecting the seeds, and then researchers find the seeds in the scats of the aardvarks and think the aardvark has eaten the cucumber, but it actually hasn't really eaten the cucumber. So,
that's a good point.
And where I worked, I never actually saw an aardvark cucumber. If there is some kind of symbiosis, it might be very, very locally restricted. But yeah, that really warrants further investigation, I would say. So, so also the aardvark gets its water from its diet, which is also why the termites are so important for the aardvark, because they're very juicy.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, if they're eating a lot of plants have a lot of water material, and then okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, how big is the average aardvark? I mean, I know that they're about the size of a small pig, but how much do males weigh? How much do females weigh? How long are they typically?
So aardvark, there's not a big difference between male and female aardvarks. You basically cannot tell them apart unless you put them on the table and look really closely at their genitals. And some of the aardvarks might object to that, I guess.
Right,
so,
I'm sure.
So just by looking at them, it's very hard to tell whether it's a girl or a boy aardvark, unless, of course, you have a zoo aardvark. In that case, you just ask the zookeeper.
Right.
And the aardvarks can weigh from about 40 kilograms, which they did in the Kalahari, to up to 70 kilograms in, for example, rainforest of the Congo, where they are less hairy and bigger.
Wow.
So 40 kilograms, that's about the size of a Labrador or a sheep.
Right. Yeah, that's like 88 pounds to 150 pounds. That's a pretty decent size.
So when aardvarks encounter humans, are they run curious? Away? Do they run away? What are their interactions with you? Not just you, humans.
They would usually get a fright and run away. Yeah.
Okay.
They're not so curious, like, for example, monkeys or apes that would come and investigate.
Yeah.
Sure.
They're very shy, very secretive and elusive, and it's really hard to find them. And especially since they are usually out at night, most of them get away before you see them. Sometimes, though, if, for example, you're out with a vehicle or with a spotlight, you can get them in your lights, and then they can't see anything for a minute, and then they might just, stall in their tracks. Right. You get a chance to see them.
Okay.
So,
and in some areas in the Kalahari or the Karoo, in winter, it gets really, really cold in the night. So sometimes they come out a little bit earlier to avoid those really, really cold hours.
Those frigid temperatures, sure.
Do they have a breeding season, or do they breed all year long?
It's really difficult to say that, because there have been such few studies on wild aardvarks, and none of us have really been able to observe enough aardvarks to say that there's a season. They might actually be aseasonal. They might be mating and reproducing throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So what's the gestation period then? And then what's a baby aardvark called?
The gestation period is about 7 months, which is quite long.
Oh, wow, that's almost a
compared to
human.
a human, which has 9 months of
Right.
gestation period. And a baby aardvark, I guess, could be called a baby aardvark, or you could say an aardvark cub as well.
Cub.
Oh,
Okay.
cute. That's
And how long
awesome.
do they hang out with their mom?
They usually stay with their mom for a couple of weeks inside the burrow before they first come out together with their mom. So after about 6 weeks, they do their first emergence, and then they stay with their mom for a few more months until they can dig their own burrows. And even then, once they can dig their own burrows, they might still stay with the mother until she has the next baby. But like I said,
Oh.
it's really hard to say because we know about this behavior mostly from zoo animals, which might be a little different from in the wild.
Correct. And
So
do the
speaking
zoos allow them to? Do the zoos provide like a burrow? Do like a simulated burrow, or put dirt around so they can dig their own burrows?
I think with a digging opportunity is a bit difficult, but most zoos that I know of here in Germany that have aardvarks, they provide a burrow-like structure. And for example, at the Frankfurt Zoo, they have a nocturnal animal house where the animals, all of them are nocturnal, but the zoo has shifted the rhythm of the animals by 12 hours. So it's dark inside there during the day, and so all the nocturnal animals, you can see them active, and when it's night for us, it's day for them, so they also sleep. So they have reversed the pattern, and it's really nice because then you also get to see the aardvark in sort of low light conditions, which is what their normal activity conditions are.
So they have these giant ears. How is their hearing really like? Do they have special super hearing capability? Do you know?
I find this a bit hard to say. So I think they can hear rustling noises very well, which means that they might be able to hear their prey. But if an animal looks for the prey, it usually puts the ears down, like a cat or a dog or a fox or something that is waiting for a mouse to come out. But the aardvarks keep them up, so I think they might be more hearing out for predators.
Gotcha.
So maybe a bit like horses would.
Right.
Now,
okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
This thing I'm reading now says that the potential threats include bushmeat trade. So people are eating aardvarks. I guess if you're hungry, you'll eat
people
anything.
eat anything.
You're right, but is it like some, going to give you masculinity or larger testicles or something like that?
What
or
the hell?
I mean, you know how some cultures think that they're going to get secret power from a rhino's horn when they're really eating a giant nail, somebody's nail. But anyway, go ahead. We'll let Dr. Nora talk about that.
Thanks, Guy and Elle. It's difficult to say. Well, no. Let me start differently. It's different in different regions. I know that in southern Africa, aardvarks are usually not hunted for bushmeat, but in more central African countries, they are sometimes hunted or trapped for bushmeat. For their meat, but also because of their skin. The skin is super tough. So once it's dried, I heard someone who told me a story that that aardvark skins got used to tow plows through fields. So that's how strong the skin is.
Wow.
I also had someone tell me that if aardvark meat is prepared properly, is really nice and tender. But I also heard voices that it's super tough. I myself, I'm vegan, so I wouldn't know. But there's also someone who told me, I think it was in Zimbabwe. There's a culture that believes aardvarks are the animals of witches, and witches are bad. And at night, when witches do their evil things, they fly through the night on aardvarks' backs.
Wow.
I thought that was a super cool fact.
Instead of a broom, it's an aardvark.
Instead of a broom, yes. Right.
Wow. So what's their average lifespan in the wild and then versus captivity?
Oh, we don't say captivity anymore. We say managed care.
Fine.
Or
managed.
Did you learn that yesterday?
Or zoo. Shh, quiet you. Yes, managed care.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, aardvarks in zoos are usually very well taken care of, and they're also, I think, quite easy to keep in the zoos because I have some connections to, for example, the zoo in Frankfurt and Cologne. And I heard that aardvarks, they breed very well in captivity. They eat what they're given more or less. So they get a special food, but they do like that. And they're quite chilled animals. They're not very aggressive. So they're also a nice animal to keep. And they can live quite long. There was an aardvark in the Frankfurt Zoo named Elvis. And Elvis
Cute.
lived for about 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
In the wild, that's usually less. And
Right.
most animals live shorter in the wild because they have much more dangers and threats to them.
Right. They're fighting for their life out there every day. Whereas in, the zoo, they're getting their food handed to them and whatnot. So what do they feel like? You said their noses are like a velvety marshmallow. What does their skin feel like? Is it soft or is it scaly or kind of like a lizard?
I think it feels quite thick. So maybe like the skin of a pig, when you have you ever scratched a pig?
Yeah. It's kind of
dry. And then they
kinda...
have these bristles. So they don't have a lot of fur, but they have these bristles that stay. And so not very soft.
No, not cuddly.
And they're quite smelly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So there said something about something with their anal gland. They mark.
Really?
Yeah. So tell us about that. Is that for mating or marking territory, or what is that for?
That's very interesting. So the aardvarks have anal glands. Both the males and females have them. So because these anal glands, so the aardvarks have internal testicles, and therefore it's very difficult to see whether it's a male or female. But all aardvarks have these anal glands, which is why females are often mistaken for male aardvarks because a lot of people think that these are testicles.
Got it.
And they also, when they sit down in the sand and then get up again, they leave a little print mark, and that often gets mistaken for a male aardvark's print but it could be either
male
or female.
Okay.
And these scent marks have a liquid in them that smells quite intensely, and the aardvark uses that for scent marking, but it's not yet understood exactly how the aardvark communicates with other aardvarks through scent marking. We don't know whether, for example, a male aardvark can perceive that a female can get pregnant, so he should be following her, or whether they also have some rivalry communication, and in how far they mark their territories. It's just not known yet.
Okay. So then I've noticed too that they've got 4 toes on their front legs and 5 on their back legs, and that their toes actually kind of like resemble hooves and that they're spade shaped. Is there a reason they have a different number of toes on front and back?
I can't exactly tell you the reason, but it might just be that they don't need it
for digging,
and that it might actually be in the way for digging to have a thumb. And they have very long and strong claws on their fingers that help them, and on their toes as well, that help them dig. They can dig really, really fast. They are super strong. It's unbelievable. They can dig a hole for themselves in just a minute or two if they need to hide urgently.
I was reading that and I saw that they can dig up to 2 feet in 15 seconds, which is
that's some incredible number. I just saw that.
I mean, I would love to see an aardvark digging competition. I feel like if it was an ethical aardvark digging competition, obviously, but I mean, that's insane. Yeah. So can you hear them did you ever get to hear them burrowing and creating their new dens and nests? That must have been pretty exciting if you got to hear that or observe that.
Yeah, so when I had tracked an aardvark of mine at its burrow and it was inside, and then I waited for it to come out, you could at some point after sunset start hearing it dig underneath. And then at some point it would come out, so you could hear the whoosh, whoosh, whoosh noises before you even saw the aardvark. It's quite cool.
That's really cool. So would you see them go in one end and then come out or excavate another side, a couple meters away?
They only did that if they felt that there was a disturbance at the entrance, but usually the entrance is also the exit. And when the aardvark is inside the burrow, at least in the sandy habitats, it goes in and it covers, as it goes in, it shovels the sand. So it basically thereby covers the entrance or exit. And no one can follow him.
So I have a question for you. that we ask all the people that specialize in certain animals. Were you assigned aardvarks, or did you pick aardvarks?
I guess both at the same time. So the research group that I was with, which is the Wildlife Conservation Physiology Unit at the School of Physiology of the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, we're gonna let you say. We're gonna just let you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
In the United States, we use abbreviations like UCLA or UC
LSU,
Berkeley, LSU,
right?
Yeah. We have the two. It's the Wiccup Lab of the BFRG at the Wits University. So,
Oh, okay, got it.
Still too long.
yeah. Anyways, so they wanted to run a project on aardvark physiology. And at the time, I was looking for a PhD project and I wanted to study wild animal physiology. And so it was just a really good match. And I was very excited because also the timing was perfect and the research group was excellent. And aardvarks are they are such an understudied species that I got really excited. I mean, I then found out that they're understudied for a reason because they are just so hard to study. But for me, that was a real challenge. And I'm still glad I did it.
It says that they can run pretty fast, 25 miles an hour. I don't know what that conversion is in kilometers, but it's pretty fast. That's for an animal.
It's very fast. I'm just not sure how long they could keep that up because when they get a fright, they sprint away really fast. So they burst out in high speed until they find a burrow, and then they just dig themselves.
Aside from not having enough termites, have you seen any kind of health issues with the aardvarks you studied in terms of?
Actually, that's a good segue because I was going to ask you too about your research. There's a bunch of great articles that reference you that I was reading about how seeing them during the day is now, I mean, it's rare, but if you're seeing them during the day that they're potentially starving or that, it's a sign of that there's been drought in the area and that those behavioral changes are like a precursor or a signifier of something else going on in the environment that's unfortunately not good for the aardvark or environment.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the main findings of my PhD study, other than that they specialize on termites in the Kalahari, is also that when there are not enough termites to feed on, the aardvark then has to try and save energy. And sometimes they resort when things really get tough. The aardvark resorts to saving energy by coming out during the day because the temperatures are a little bit milder during the day, and basically their brain tells the aardvark go out during the day. It's warmer, so you don't need to maintain your own body temperature. And that is fine because that's actually in general a very good pre-adaptation because usually the food scarcity is in winter, and in winter it's really cold at night and much milder during the day. So when there's little food in winter, it's okay to come out during the day because you avoid the super cold temperatures and you save some energy. There's a problem, though, if the aardvark starves in summer, which is what was happening during the drought, because then the brain doesn't know that it's summer, and it still tells the aardvark to go out during the day. And then what happens then is that it gets really hot and it's stressful for the aardvark. They are exposed to a lot of heat, and possibly, but we haven't really explored that, possibly they then lose extra water during that time. But it also means that when you see an aardvark during the day, it usually is because it doesn't have enough energy to maintain its own body temperature. So the aardvark that is out during the day is trying to save energy.
They're warming
because
up.
it doesn't have enough food. And that's why we say that it's usually a bad sign to see an aardvark during the day, even though it's really nice to see an aardvark.
Right, of course. But for its overall well-being, it's like, oh, we'd rather you be sleeping and, there's enough to sustain you so you can do your business or during the night.
So, Dr. Nora, when you told your parents you're going to get a PhD in aardvarks, did they say Auf Wiedersehen to you?
Well, I had already spent some time in South Africa. So when I first told my mom and my family in general that I was going to go to South Africa, many of the responses were, "You're crazy. Why would you go so far away?" But my grandma was the coolest, and she said, "Oh, Africa, so many nice animals."
See,
Nice.
grandma gets it.
That's my
My grandma
grandma.
just hit the nail on the head.
Yep.
And I guess when I said I'm going to go to the Kalahari for 3 years to study aardvarks, my mother just said, "Why, child? Why are you doing this?"
So
But then
I
she
was
visited me. She got to visit me.
Oh,
She fell in
yay.
love with the Kalahari, with
Of
South
course.
Africa, and with aardvarks.
Oh, yay.
So the Kalahari encompasses many nations. Is that correct?
The Kalahari is a really vast environment that is spread across many countries.
Countries, yes.
Yeah, what'd you
Okay.
say, Paige?
So as each country designated the Kalahari as a wildlife preserve, or is it just like uncharted? In other words, is it protected, the Kalahari?
Or does it depend on the country that that's portion is in?
Yeah.
Um, well, the Kalahari is much bigger than that. I guess it's like saying maybe the Sierra Nevada is completely made a nature reserve because there are cities in it. You know, it's a really big region. There are
Right. It
Right.
is
cities in it. There
giant.
are roads through it. It's really big, and but there are many nature reserves and national parks in the Kalahari. So many parts of it include areas that are protected.
Okay. Okay.
Great.
So I had
Yeah.
another
Where were those
question
guys
too.
that we spoke to in Africa? They were the
Kenya.
poaching police. Kenya?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had a
Um,
group of lion rangers on, the guys that go and after the people hunting
Well,
animals in the
weren't they
conservancy.
protecting the
And
elephants
then
or something?
and the elephants, yes, and the elephants too. So I was reading too that they are beneficial to humans in areas where termites thrive. You know, that's a natural way to get rid of termites, and then which obviously keeps the termites from damaging crops. But then also that their ecological impact is beyond valuable as they are a keystone species in many ecosystems. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
yes, sure. Um, I'm an aardvark enthusiast.
Right.
So my opinion might be a bit biased, of course,
That's
but
okay.
it's very clear that the aardvark has a really, really important role in its ecosystem because there is no other animal in Africa that digs so many burrows as the aardvark does.
Okay.
And many other animals use these burrows to protect their youngs, to protect themselves from extreme heat or cold in the winter. Yeah, so, so these animals mostly would not be able to dig their own burrows, which is why they
Okay.
use the aardvark's burrows. And if the aardvark no longer existed in certain areas, these animals would no longer find this shelter.
Right.
And therefore, it's really a keystone species because so many animals depend on it, and because it changes its environment actively, it's also considered an ecosystem engineer.
Ah,
Um,
okay.
yeah, and the aardvark. So that's why the aardvark is very important in natural ecosystems. It often is not very popular with farmers because the aardvark digs a lot and sometimes it
Sure.
digs holes in roads, so vehicles can get stuck or slightly damaged, or cattle can also injure themselves if they step into one of these holes.
Right.
So they're not super popular with farmers, but I guess it really also depends on what kind of farm you have, and
Sure.
if it's a crop farm, the farmer might be grateful to have an aardvark or two, but the problem is that crop farms usually use pesticides anyways. So
Right.
there might not be that many aardvarks that could be sustained on such farms. But we are hoping that um, I think many farmers are more and more. Farmers are usually quite aware of the natural conditions in their
Right.
area, and we hope that knowing about the aardvark's importance in the ecosystem and also the soil turnover that it participates in,
Oh, yeah.
um,
It's a really good
makes
point.
it clear to them that they are also beneficial to ecosystems.
Right. They're worth keeping around and not, trying to get rid of. And so I also was reading too that they can eat up to like 50,000 termites in a night. And speaking of eating and whatnot, what was, as far as your research it went, what was the most exciting part of your research? Or what's your favorite aardvark moment from your research?
There are so many. I would really like to think. So I told you that I was placing camera traps at these burrows to check when my aardvarks would leave their burrows, and sometimes
Right.
when they would come back. And what I really loved about going out every day and collecting my camera traps was to look at which other animals would try to use the
Oh,
aardvark burrows,
yeah.
because on every single day, whenever I had placed a camera trap, there were other animals, not just one species, but many species actually, that were trying to use this Aardvark burrow. And the most popular ones, the most common ones that I saw on these camera trap images were porcupines, warthogs, and bat-eared foxes.
Oh,
But
cool.
once there was also a really big monitor lizard,
Oh,
which must have been more than a meter long,
Oh
a
my
small
gosh.
antelope, some birds or bats, so some really cool species on there. Sometimes several in a row, so you could see that the porcupine had already gone in, but the warthogs also tried, and then it chased the warthogs out, and it was sometimes quite funny. Um, so these were my favorite everyday moments, I
Sure,
guess,
of course, of course.
that really made it worth studying the Aardvark. I mean, apart
Right.
from living in the Kalahari
Right.
in a really beautiful nature reserve.
Sure, sure.
And I think one of the most special moments was when one of the aardvarks had a cub, and the first time that I
Oh.
saw this cub on camera trap, because we had no idea. It's really hard to
Uh-huh.
tell if an aardvark is pregnant or not.
Oh, okay.
Even in the zoo, zookeepers always find out basically last minute that an
Right, like,
aardvark
oh,
is pregnant
having a baby.
because they're
we have
already so
another
round.
aardvark.
They have this strange shape. And then the one aardvark came out with another aardvark, and we first thought that the other aardvark might be a mate, but then
Right.
we realized that it was much smaller than the other one in different footage. So that was really special.
Wow, that's so cool. Do you still have
And
that footage?
yes, I do.
Oh, cool.
And so that was really amazing. And just also in general seeing the difference of how well aardvarks do and how they behave when they come out and so on in a summer and winter, when they're doing very well in terms of food and water and so on, uh, compared to a summer and winter when they're not doing well, because then they behave differently, they look differently, of course, because they're much skinnier then.
Oh,
and uh, and yeah, just an amazing experience to study these animals in the wild,
absolutely.
undisturbed in their natural environment, without interfering with them too much. That was a real privilege, and I'm very glad that this research could take place.
Absolutely. We are too, because we're glad you're here to tell us
Well,
about it.
thank you
Because
for spending the time with us, and we appreciate that. What time is it where you are?
I know we'll let you go, Dr. Nora.
It's
It's just after 8 p.m.
oh, okay.
Yeah, but I'm sure she's had a long
Yeah,
day.
you're
But
yeah.
then before we let you go here, there was one other
Yeah, I
thing.
think you wanted to ask maybe about predators and threats.
Yes, predators
Yes.
and threats. I mean, obviously humans, that is the ongoing unfortunate theme on our show. Is it's usually humans and deforestation, or habitat destruction is usually top of the list.
Mm. Yeah, we think that habitat degradation is a big problem, and also I can't come up with the English word now.
Say it, you could just
You say it in
say it in
German, it's
German.
okay.
No, I can't. No, when I can't come up with a word in English, then it's not there in German either.
Oh,
It's just not there.
Dr.
um,
Nora, do you count in English or German?
it depends what I do.
Oh, really? Because usually counting is what your
Yes,
dominant language
counting and
is.
the dreaming. It starts when you dream in the other language, and then
oh,
eventually you start to
weird.
count in the other language. But I I count, I guess, in both languages. But when I have to calculate something, I do it in German.
Okay.
What about thinking? Like when you're thinking to yourself, is that in German or English?
It really depends because my work is in English. So whenever I think about work, it's in English. When I think about my private life, it's mostly German. But then also it's half and half.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, let's get her back to try to help her find the word that she was looking for.
Habitat loss and degradation is a big problem. And so it's for all species, it's very important to have not only conservation areas or preserved, protected areas, but also to have corridors and connections between these reserves, so that the populations are not completely separated, because then they become more vulnerable. So that, I guess, and the expansion of human infrastructure and cities and roads and so on, that can also be detrimental to all animals or to very many species. For the aardvark in particular, in the hot and dry environments, we think climate change might increasingly be an issue. And for aardvarks in general, of course, it's hunting in parts, but also their natural predators, which include lions, leopards, and pythons. But aardvarks are usually not a staple prey because they don't occur in herds like antelope that occurs in large herds, and there's always a weak one or an old one. They're very hard to catch. They're very fast, and they're super elusive.
It's a prey item of opportunity, essentially. Like if, I'm hungry. Ooh, there's an aardvark. All right, I have a chance. Happen to get it. Okay, so then I think it might have been either Germany or Holland. I can't remember, or the Netherlands. I can't remember. But developing these land bridges for animals to cross safely over roads and bypass human infrastructure. Are you familiar with that at all?
I'm familiar with the concept, yes, and it works for very many species, and it's really important for migratory species, actually.
Right.
But I think just also having unfenced reserves, and just not separating habitats in the first place.
Right, of course, is obviously the best way to go. Absolutely, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Do most of these connections in the areas, like if there's a road, do they generally go under or do they go over? I would suspect they probably go under to keep, but I'm not sure. What have you seen in terms of trying
hopefully that's not a problem for them,
allowing animals to migrate, the migration spaces? Is it underneath?
Yeah, I think animals that are investigative might use the bridges over highways, for example. But in Africa, that's not a very common structure. So the aardvark will cross the road on top of the road, and often they do get hit and unfortunately end up as roadkill.
Yeah,
it does happen. It happens to a lot of different species.
Sure. Well, on a lighter note, I wrote, no more aardvark roadkill.
Drive slowly at night when you are in aardvark regions.
Yes, there we go. Oh, yeah. So I was reading too that they can seal off their nostrils, and what is that to do? Is that to prevent like dust and stuff from getting up in their nose, or?
Yeah, exactly.
Termite in their nose.
Exactly. So the aardvarks, they dig in the sand. And then, so they dig a little hole where they think there are ants and termites, where they can smell them. So they dig a bit, and then they blow air into the hole to uncover the tunnels of the ants and termites. And then when they eat very close to the ground with their nose, and so they have to close their nostrils in order to prevent sand going in, and also when they dig their holes into their burrows, they also have to just prevent the sand from going in, and that's where all the hair comes in handy.
Okay. And have you seen them like seal their nose off? Have you ever like seen them do that, or is that something you'd have to like see them doing?
No, it's quite common actually. I mean, it's just a sort of a movement of their nostril. It's something they do.
Okay. And can they move the tip of their nose kind of like flexible like a pig, or? Oh, cool.
It's really flexible and mobile, and
wow.
Yeah, it's quite fun to watch.
Something else I read said that they're pretty good swimmers. Have you observed that behavior?
I haven't observed it myself because there was literally no water in the Kalahari.
Okay, well then that's a good
I can
reason.
do it.
Yes.
But they have been reported to cross rivers, and in zoos they
Yeah.
sometimes go take a little bath if there's a swimming opportunity.
Oh,
Right.
okay. Oh, we'll have to see that.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Nora, for
Thank
coming on
you.
the show. We really appreciate you. Thank you for letting us, take some time away from your evening. Yeah, well, if you have any questions for Dr. Nora, send us an email, justanimalspod, or find us on Instagram. And if you have any questions for her, again, send us an email and we'll get back to you on that. And thank you again for your time, Dr. Nora. We appreciate you coming on the show. We'd love to have you
Yes,
back
thank
in
you. Appreciate
in
it.
the future. And thanks for all you do for the Aardvarks.
Thanks a
Yes.
lot, Ellen, Guy, for the
Thank
opportunity
you.
to talk about Aardvarks with you. I really enjoyed
Right.
it, and I hope you have lots of more interesting guests about interesting animals.
Yeah.
Enjoy your
Spread the
podcast.
word on the podcast. It's
I will.
we'll get some German fans. And thank you. Your English is lovely.
Yeah, your
Thanks a
English is
lot.
better than some native
Yeah.
speakers. No,
The only one word I was going to change in your pronunciation was
oh my
plow.
gosh.
She pronounced it differently. I forgot what she
Okay,
said.
so
Really?
No. Yeah. Well, I want to help her so that